So I'm thrilled to be here today. My name's Chrissy D'Alejandro. I'm the Executive Director of Tennessee Achieves. I've been here for 13 years, which is just mind-blowing to me, considering I started this mayor when I was 12, right? So just 25 years old. A very long time. I was talking about Tennessee Achieves recently to someone, and I said it's part of my identity. I love this program so much that it's hard to separate Chrissy D'Alejandro from the work that we do here. But I will tell you, part of the reason that we launched Find Your Why, which is a statewide campaign really focused on student voice, specifically students who may not have college as a foregone conclusion in their lives. When we launched Knox Achieves in 2008, the idea was to provide an opportunity for every student to earn a college credential, but we were really focused on that student who maybe thought that college was not an option for them. The attempt was to break down many of the barriers that often these students are presented. And what has resulted now is Tennessee Promise, where we can now say to first graders, college is your destiny. But part of that conversation has to come with what I often call finding that fire in your belly. What is it about you as a person that really makes you excited and want to dig in when it gets tough? This is particularly true for students who, like me, were the first in their families to go to college. I feel like I should caveat it for the entire group before I make introductions in saying that my parents were great. I'm sure all the panelists here would also say they had really great, supportive parents. But the difference oftentimes for first generation students is because you're the first one making this journey, it's often a little bit scarier. It's often a bit more intimidating. And it's often that you face barriers that you don't have a quick phone call home to say, like, hey, mom, this happened in the bursar's office. I know Tina Walker, my mom, would have said, what's a bursar, right? And so thinking through that through the lens of a first generation student, Tennessee Achieves just wants to have a conversation today with our panelists about their journey in hopes of helping ignite that fire in our class of 2021. So they see that they're not the first one to have these thoughts. They're not the first ones to experience these challenges. And that they also, I think most importantly, have a lifeline. Someone that's not only there to support you, but also that just gets it, right? Like there are many of us at Tennessee Achieves, Mayor Ragsdale representing our board member, we just get it. We've been there too. And so I wanted to kick off to say, like, this, I think, is maybe one of the most important conversations that we will have, especially in 2021, when life feels chaotic and uncertain. We want you to feel positive about making that transition to post-secondary, and we want to help you find what motivates you. I am so excited about today's panel, two of which I know really well, and I'm super excited to get to know Oscar, our student better, who will no doubt steal the show today. But first, as I said, we have a Tennessee Achieves board member, a founding Tennessee Achieves board member, and although Randy Boyd and Bill Haslam get lots of credit in the Tennessee Promise space, both of which deserve that credit, it really was Mayor Mike Ragsdale who had the idea and who brought this idea from something that was scribbled on a whiteboard to what we now know has helped nearly 450,000 students have the opportunity to earn a post-secondary credential, tuition and fee-free, but also with all sorts of different layers of support. So the mayor was my boss for 6 years. There's, I'm sure, a really great bio I can read about you, Mayor, but he was my boss for 6 years when I worked as deputy chief of staff in the mayor's office. He took a chance on a kid that had no idea what she was doing. But I think part of what built our relationship is we have a really similar story. Both grew up in small town Tennessee. The mayor grew up in Cleveland. He was the first person in his family to go to college. He went on to get a PhD. I was a PhD student when I first landed in the mayor's office. I think he's got a really big heart, and much of that heart is rooted in education and providing opportunities for others. He's the kind of person that puts others before himself. I saw it time and again when we were in the mayor's office. He's still a part of the Tennessee Achieves board and very much still a part of my life. So thanks for being here, Mayor.
Glad to be here.
Another panelist is Summer Deason. Sumner has been, it feels like Sumner's been at Tennessee Achieves for a really long time, but she's one of our newer Tennessee Achieves members, although Sumner, this is coming up on your second year, right?
Yeah, we're coming up pretty close to year 2.
Which is crazy. So I'm from McMinnville, Tennessee, or McMinnville, if you went on to Swanee and tried to sound a little bit more sophisticated, but my parents would say McMinnville, Tennessee. Sumner grew up there too, so she's a hometown girl. She's also the first person in her family to go to college. I will tell you that Sumner serves as one of our complete coaches. So we launched an initiative at Tennessee Achieves in 2018 known as Complete, where we provide a dedicated coach to students who often fall in sort of these high risk categories to help them navigate the path to post-secondary. Sumner actually serves as one of our Knox Promise coaches, which is a Haslam family funded pilot that not only provides a coach for every student, but also provides some completion grant funding. Sumner's students love Sumner so much, and she is so crazy dedicated to her students. I can tell you, if Sumner asks me to do something for her students, I always say yes, because I always know it's coming from a place of putting the student at the center of the conversation. And I will tell you, we're just really, really fortunate to have Sumner as one of our coaches. So thanks for being here, Sumner.
Thank you.
And then we have Oscar. Oscar is from Lincoln County, not originally, but I don't want to steal your story, but he currently lives in Fayetteville, Tennessee. So I love this theme of like rural, like, right? We're all first gen, but we're also coming from a rural perspective. Oscar is a student at Motlow State. And what I hear, and again, Oscar, not going to steal your thunder, but that he's really also passionate about education and wants to be an educator. So I'm really excited to hear from Oscar. I will tell you that my team, Oscar, raves about you. Ben Sterling specifically has been so excited for you to be a part of our panel. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it so much. I appreciate them too for always trying to put me on a spotlight, I guess.
That's great. We love highlighting our students, so we're really excited about you being here. Mayor, why don't you, even though I've given a brief introduction, just talk a little bit about your journey, how you made it from Cleveland High School to the University of Tennessee and beyond, and then what you do now.
That's quite a journey. I grew up in Cleveland, Tennessee, and my job was washing cars at Benton, Pontiac, and Buick. And I enjoyed that job, and it was a good job to have. But with that being said, it was the type of job you knew you didn't want to have forever because it got awfully hot in the summer and awfully cold in the winter. And so I had an opportunity to go to college because of a lot of encouragement from my mom and dad. Neither of my parents or truly anybody in my family had ever had an opportunity to go to college. And it's much like you said, Chrissy, it's not that we had bad parents. We had great parents. I couldn't have done it without them. They wanted me to go, but they didn't have experiences that they could really share with me to help. But they provided a lot of encouragement. I would view college as not an option in their eyes. For me, it was almost a requirement something that they wanted me to do that would improve my life. So back in the fall of 1971, which really dates me compared to the rest of the folks on this show today, had an opportunity to go to the University of Tennessee. And back in those days, the university was open to anyone who was a Tennessee high school graduate. That's changed. Nowadays, if my resume or transcript would pass across the desk in the admissions office, it would have been laughed at. It's like, this guy thinks he can get into the University of Tennessee. Well, back then they had to take it. And thank goodness they did, because it turned out well. It was a great experience for me. And so actually, like Oscar, had an interest in education. I wanted to be an educator. My first job was at Mississippi State Community College. And from there, I left and spent 16 years in private business in Knoxville, then 8 years in the mayor's office, and prior to that, 8 years as a county commissioner. And so, Oscar, be really cautious, because a lot of people who start out in education end up in politics. And, that same thing could happen to you. But it was a really, really fun journey for me to do that. And when term limits hit and I left office in 2010, along with someone who Chrissy's incredibly familiar with, that we all work together, Mike Arms, we formed a company, Tennessee Strategies, and we work with companies now across Tennessee. And so it's been a great experience. But all those experiences, I think, would not have been possible if I had not had the opportunity to go to college. So I owe a great deal to the University of Tennessee and to my mom and dad for providing the encouragement, even if they didn't have a lot of background, that they could help me out when I first started.
Mayor, I know your story because I was your speechwriter in the mayor's office. Do you mind sharing the story about your friend Mark and the tip top bags and the Army locker and the call to your parents? I think that story would really resonate.
Yeah, and sure. When we left to go to UT in 1971, I'll never forget my very best friend, Mark Tasman, who's now an incredibly successful businessman in Atlanta, Georgia. My mom and dad borrowed the next door neighbor's station wagon, and we went to the University of Tennessee. And my clothes were packed in my dad's old Army locker, but we were the Ragsdales were way ahead of the Tasmans, because Mark had his bag or clothes packed in 2 grocery bags from Tip Top Food Town in Cleveland. So think about that. You roll up in an old beat up Army locker and a couple of grocery bags, and you move into the dorm. And I'll never forget, I'm almost embarrassed to tell this story, because one of the things I wanted my mom to do is to go buy me what I would refer to as a store-bought blanket, where I wouldn't have just an old homemade quilt on my bed. And of course, she did that. Nowadays, the quilt would have been much more in vogue than that cheap blanket was that we ended up buying. But we were quite the sight when we arrived there. And so UT started out great simply because we had air conditioning in the dorm, which didn't have at home. You could eat all you wanted to at the cafeteria, which I thought was a magnificent experience. And then things took a turn for the worse after we'd been there about 3 days. Classes actually started for us. And it was a tough experience because we had never had anything like that before. So we had to work really, really hard to just try and keep up. And I'll never forget one day going back to my dorm, no cell phones in those days. You get on the phone. I called my dad, collect, of course, so he had to pay for it. And I told him, I said, I just can't do this. I said, it's way above my head. I can't make this. I said, come get me and bring me back home. And I'll never forget how he responded. It was, your mom and I believe in you. Do the absolute best you can and everything will be okay. And don't be afraid to ask for help. And, when you look at that, those same words of advice, I think really ring true today. All the folks that we have in the Tennessee Achieves, Tennessee Promise programs have that ability. A lot of times it just means you got to try the absolute best you can. And also don't be afraid to ask for help. And that's a strategy that's worked for me, not only through the college years, but also in life. And I think can be really good advice for others pursuing a similar path as well.
Yeah, I love that story so much. And, I have a similar story of when my parents dropped me off at Swanee. They just moved me in and then they left. And there was like a whole weekend planned for students and parents. So not only was I think maybe the only student at Sewanee at the time that was the first in their family to go to college, it certainly felt like that. But I was navigating this first 3 days where it was like parent weekend, parent orientation by myself. And so I had a very similar call to my parents, sobbing, what have I gotten myself into? I don't know how to do this all by myself. And they were like, dig in, right? You wanted to be there, dig in. And so I realized really quickly what you said is that if I was going to make it, I had to get really comfortable saying, I don't know, and asking for help. Right. And that was a lot of ego and pride swallowing, but I think something that's really important for our students to hear.
Great.
Okay, Sumner, let's talk about your journey from McMinnville girl to Tennessee Tech and then over to where you are now.
Yeah, so I grew up in McMinnville. And growing up, I was always pretty academically driven. I was raised by my grandparents along with three of my younger siblings. And, I had always just wanted to bring home good grades and make them proud. And it was just something that I always wanted to do. But, going into high school, when you start having those conversations about college, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Like, where do you see yourself? It really had me thinking a lot deeper. And so when I thought about that, I just I had this like yearning and like fire in my belly. I just wanted something more. I knew that there was something more out there, even though I didn't necessarily know like what that looked like for me. But I just wanted something different for myself and for my future family. So growing up, being the first person in my family to graduate college or go to college and, being raised by my grandparents in a lower income family, sometimes it really felt like those odds were somewhat stacked against me at times. But, I came to the realization that I couldn't choose the path for other people, but I could myself and I could change that. And that's what I wanted to set out to do. I have a huge passion for helping others and for serving others. And I knew in order to take that a step further that I needed to go to college and pursue that so that I could, be able to have opportunities to make a difference in the lives of other families and other people. And I'm so fortunate that's what I get to do currently.
So good. Talk to me about why Tennessee Tech. I mean, it's like, 45 minutes from home. You have younger siblings that I know you feel probably some responsibility for. Did that play into your decision?
Yeah, that was a huge part of my decision. I mean, other than knowing that Tennessee Tech is a great school, it's in a smaller town comparative to, Knoxville or Nashville. So it was kind of a homey feeling to me, but also, yes, then also being close to home, being the oldest of my siblings, I did feel that responsibility, and moving away from them was harder just because I couldn't always be there if they needed me or if my family needed me for any reason. But having that shorter distance definitely did help and was, I think it's what made Tennessee Tech a great fit for me.
Yeah, I think fit is so important, right? When you're choosing a school, I think, oftentimes when we talk about Tennessee Promise or Tennessee Achieves, the outside world thinks we're just trying to funnel every student into a community or technical college. And it really isn't about that for us. This is allowing every student to have the opportunity to earn a credential. But what we really want is for students to find the right fit for them, right? Whatever that was. I remember when I first started looking at colleges, I really thought I wanted to go to Vanderbilt. For whatever reason, in my head, that was like the mecca of colleges, right? And then I stepped onto campus and I was like, whoa, this is like way too big for like a girl that has been, in very much a small town bubble. And hence the reason Sewanee felt like the right fit for me, because it had all the components that I liked about Vanderbilt, but it was also like sort of sequestered in this tiny little small town. It was actually, the student population was smaller than my high school. And so I liked that about it. So I think fit is really important as we have conversations with students about their why. Okay, Oscar, to you. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, my journey, it's just bittersweet, kind of, I guess you can say. I grew up, my parents crossed over. So they're from Mexico, really. And they came to Utah, where I was born at. But it was a bit of a harsh to start off with out here in the middle of nowhere when they came down this way. And, as I was growing up, they've always told me, we want you to be something in life. We want you to do something big, something that, something for others, help others, stuff like that. So my family has always been my key, I guess you can say, and they've always pushed me to my limits. And, for college, I had nobody really to ask questions about here and there. So I would always ask our high school advisor college, I guess you can call her. She was like something like that. And so she was a great resource at the high school
Yeah, no. Well, tell me a bit about why you chose Montlow. Montlow, are you at the Fayetteville campus of Montlow? Still able to go home to your family in the evenings? And are you working at all?
Yes, I am. So I chose Montlow here close to home because it's close to home, and I wanted the 2 years to kind of be a smooth transition. Because at first I wanted to go to MTSU, but I was like, that's a long way from home. I was like, I want to stay at home as well, like summer kind of. And then right now I work as a educational assistant. It's a few minutes away from my house at a local feeder school, which it's a great opportunity for me to have hands-on experience on. And, it's a great foot into the education field.
That's great. So, Oscar, is your plan to earn your associate's degree at Montlow and then transfer on to MTSU? Is that the plan?
Yes, that's the plan right now, of going to Montlow and then transferring to MTSU for the last 2 years to get my bachelor's. And I feel like later on I'll want to get a master's as well, but that's still floating in the air, which I feel like I will end up getting.
I think that's great. I think it's good to set big, hairy, audacious goals, right? And when we started Knox Achieves, I know the mayor would echo this. You're the exact student that we wanted to create a program to help, thinking about the idea of starting off at Montlow, being able to stay home and raise money as you think about going on to the four-year institution. So I think this is so great. Mayor, some of you touched on this, but can you dig into, as a first generation student, do you feel like you had unique challenges that you faced? And then, thinking about those challenges, how you maneuvered to overcome them?
Well, I think you do have some challenges. Your mom and dad, while they can be supportive, they can't provide a whole lot of advice and guidance about here's what you can expect when you go to college. They just never had the experience. They didn't know. While they knew it was important to go, they couldn't help with many of the dynamics of it. And one of the things I'm really embarrassed to admit, but it was little small things, like you were saying. Nobody knew what the bursar was at an institution. I remember when I got my first schedule, it had classes. It showed MWF. I figured out that meant Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But on the schedule, it also had TR. And for some reason in my mind, I thought that meant Thursday. And I thought, well, that's really good. I don't have any classes on Tuesday. And it took me about 4 weeks into classes when one of my classmates said, how come you never come to class on Tuesday? And it's like, I didn't know we had it on Tuesday. I thought TR meant Thursday, not realizing it meant Tuesday and Thursday. So it was just a lot of little things like that. And everything from not knowing when you signed up for the meal plan that the one I had didn't cover weekends. So what are you supposed to do to eat on Saturday and Sunday? And a lot of just little bitty things like that. Until my dad encouraged me, I was too embarrassed to go ask a professor for help, simply because I didn't want to embarrass myself. And quite candidly, you embarrass yourself more when you don't go to ask for help than you do when you go. So it's just a lot of little things like that I wasn't really prepared for and didn't know how the college experience worked. But I have to tell you, it didn't really take very long. After about 6 months at University of Tennessee, certainly through my first year, I had enough knowledge of the process and the experience that I could be successful with anybody whose parents have been to college for generations. And it's a game changer. And make no mistake about it, if you have a college degree, whether it's from a college of applied technology, one of our community colleges, or one of our universities, you are in such a much better position for employment, to support your family, as Sumner mentioned, to be able to create dreams like Oscar referred to, than you would be if you didn't have that. And I can tell you beyond any doubt, the best time to go is not to wait 10 years when you get out of high school, but try and go as soon as you can when you get out of high school. When you look at folks who wait, they can be successful, no doubt about it. Many are, but that's a much tougher climb than it is right when you get out of high school. So for folks who may be listening today, I would strongly encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity that you have in front of you right now. And I think when you look back on it in the future, you're going to think, wow, that was a smart choice.
Yeah, I think if you bring up a good point that it's intimidating in the beginning, right? Like that first semester is just so hard. I feel like specifically for first generation students, because I think the mindset is that, well, it certainly was for me, that I was the only one that had these questions. I was the only one who was in this spot. Yeah. Right. But as I've been on this journey of Tennessee Achieves over the last 13 years, I haven't met anyone that was like, my first semester of college was awesome. My grades were great. I knew exactly what was going on. But I think we're just so nervous about sharing that, right, with others if you're first generation, because maybe that seems like if you start having those conversations that people will think you weren't meant to be there. That it makes it like almost like an internal head game that you have as a first generation student. I remember I got chicken pox my first semester. So you layer on first generation, and then I got the chicken pox, and I had to miss like a week and a half of class, which was a lot of class, right? It's a lot of class to miss in college. And when I came back, we were like so far ahead in my chemistry class. I thought like, I'm already not doing well in chemistry and I'm going to fail. And so much like you, Mayor, I like swallowed it all down, and I went to speak with Dr. John Bordley, my chemistry professor, who I'll never, ever forget. And I was like, I'm going to fail this class, and I don't fail things, like help me. And so he cut me a deal where he would see me every Tuesday, Thursday for 1 hour of office hours to like review everything that we had talked about in class at a Chrissy pace. If I sat in the front of chemistry every single class period. So I was sitting in the back with all my friends as a first-time freshman, but then I started walking the lonely journey all the way to the bottom where I sat in the front. And I was like his assistant. So when he did like, experiments, he would be like, how does this feel, Chrissy? And I'd be like, hot. Like it was mortifying, but I knew like at the end of the day, right, that this was going to be what set me apart. Like I had to do something to show him that I meant business. And sometimes that means, again, sort of swallowing your pride.
It does. And you make a really good point. When you're sick and you're not there, it's hard to be successful. It's particularly hard to be successful if you decide, gee, I think I'm not going to go to class today. I've never met anyone who went to class every day and wasn't successful. I've met lots of people who went to 2/3 of their classes or half their classes and they weren't successful. The key is show up. And if you show up, that is one of the absolute biggest hurdles you've overcome right out of the chute. And it's not hard to do. It's just put it in your mind that I'm not going to miss class. I'm always going to go, and you're going to be well on your way to success.
Love it. All right, Sumner, how about you? Unique challenges that you feel like that you faced as a first generation student?
Yeah, so for me, it was support. And I'm not talking about like emotional support, because I had the biggest cheerleaders behind me, being my family and friends, and couldn't have done it without them. But I'm just talking about support in the sense of, asking those questions and figuring things out, because, like you said, Mayor, we didn't have the experience. There were so many things that we didn't have the answers to, and just a lot of unknowns. And in that first semester, it is so overwhelming, just trying to figure things out in the beginning. So that kind of support, like figuring things out, was a huge challenge for me. I'm kind of a shy person. And so I really had to learn to advocate for myself, in the sense of, making sure I was staying in check with my advisor, or, talking to financial aid if that was needed, or whatever that looked like, especially when it came to reaching out to my professors for things. I took anatomy and physiology, and it was a huge struggle for me. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get it. I was studying all the time. I couldn't understand that. And so as nervous as I was to go into his office and to ask for help, I did. And I'm so thankful that I did, because I really kind of felt at that time that I was just drowning in work and just trying so hard to understand, but couldn't. So I'm so thankful that I branched out and did that. So making sure that, I advocate for myself and just find the support that I needed, even though it wasn't necessarily there when I began, I definitely developed those relationships throughout my time there and found that.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's support. Like it's so many multiple layers of support, Sumner, right? Like, again, you can have a really great support system at home, even if your parents didn't go to college. But it's also like once you land there and you're navigating this path, right? I think those academic supports. I remember like really needing math tutoring, and I was like a really great math student in high school, and then got to college and was taking multidimensional calculus and thinking like I have no idea what I'm doing, and then trying to figure out when is tutoring and how to get to tutoring. And then I didn't want anyone to know I needed math tutoring, right? And then I got in there and like half my class was in for math tutoring, right? I wasn't the only one. And so again, I think it's this mentality of you're the only one that needs all these additional layers of support. But when you peel all that back, that really is nearly every college student. How about you, Oscar? Any resources, your challenges at Motlow and resources that have helped you overcome those?
Well, a huge resource would be actually my college advisor there, Josh Codwell. Any questions that pop up, I would email him immediately. In less than a day or so, he would always respond back to me, which was like one of my key things, that he was a big help there, and my teachers as well. Well, he started recommending me, hey, might as well ask your professor and see what your professor has to say, or ask him if you can stay an hour, And we have here at Motlow, we have a writing center, and then we have a math lab where you can go in and they'll help you develop great essays. And we have our math lab where, you can go in and help out doing math and stuff like that. And pretty much those were my biggest resources I used there. And they helped me get through it all the first semester with plenty of questions. I had emailed Josh Codwell. Bless him for answering each one of them.
Hey, Oscar, what do you think it is that made you comfortable with sending those emails? Any advice that you would give to students who are maybe nervous about doing that?
Well, there was no one else, I guess you can say, that I knew. And when I went there for the first time, he was someone that went up to us and talked to us. And he communicated so much information. And he's like, if you ever have a question, come and ask. So he was very welcoming, really, there. So that's one of the reasons why I really can't go to him for anything. Even so now, this past semester, I was thinking about being an elementary teacher. And I had told him, I was like, hey, what if I do that? How will that work? And then I looked at it and I was like, oh, well, no, I'm not really going into that way. I was like, I'll stay where I'm at right now, and he was fine with it, was big help,
That's so good. Part of this is about you've broken the cycle in your family. Like my mom didn't make it past the 10th grade, but I think she takes all the credit when it comes to the fact that I went all the way in school, which I love, by the way. She does certainly deserve much of the credit. But for me, I think about not only how it affected my parents. I'm an only child. Mayor, you're also an only child. Mm-hmm. But how it affects my children. I have 3 small children, and I talk about it all the time. My 11, 7, and 5-year-olds, unlike me, talk about going to college now all the time, right? Where they're going. Beatrice wants to go to Swanee, but Oliver wants to go to Vanderbilt or Wake Forest. He changes his mind all the time. He's going to be that kid for me, for sure. But I love that the cycle has forever been broken, and we are now a college-going unit at the D'Alejandro house. Mayor, how do you think that affected David when you graduated, torchbearer, went on to get your PhD? Was it just then a foregone conclusion for David at that point?
Well, I think in a lot of ways it was. And where it wasn't a foregone conclusion for me, David, growing up in a household where both of his parents were college graduates, made it a little bit easier. And he went to the University of Tennessee. I was able to help in ways that my mom and dad weren't able to help with. And consequently, he's a graduate now at the University of Tennessee, lives in New York City, does very, very well in high-end fashion advertising. Next year, my daughter will be a freshman at the University of Tennessee. I'm very proud of her. So I do think it's a generational type thing. It's much easier for the second and third generations to have that opportunity than it is the first. Not that we're special, not that our challenges are just incredibly unique and so much more difficult than somebody else, but I do think you have a little bit of an advantage, maybe a big advantage, when your parents went to college ahead of you. So has David and Ruby Kate and Annie, will they get the benefit of that? I think they will, because their parents went to college as well.
Yeah. How about you, Sumner? You have what, a 1-year-old now, right?
Yes, he turns 1 in a month. So great.
That's crazy, by the way. Time is so fluid, especially in the pandemic. Tell me what this means for your son. What do you think this means? Why is this important to him?
It kind of means everything. I can't wait to be able to start having those conversations with him. Going to start early, of course, but he doesn't have to worry about breaking that family cycle. And, a lot of the challenges that I went through, he doesn't necessarily have to face. But, after having the experience that I have, I can just support him and encourage him in a much different way than maybe what I had, or just something that looks different. And so I just hope that it opens up a lot more opportunities for him, and that he just really has that hope that he can go on and do whatever it is that he wants to do, and that I can support him through that.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I feel like the conversations are so different. With my 11-year-old, I'm like, you better start preparing yourself now if you have these big dreams of these big schools, because, it's a different ballgame. And I think about no one ever had that conversation with me. My mom was hardcore about spelling words and, all the things that needed to prepare me academically, but we never talked about the next step in the journey. It was sort of what was happening right then so that I could find academic success, which worked out. But having those next step conversations, I think, are also so important to begin so early. We have conversations with people across the country now about the Tennessee Achieves model. And one of the questions I always get is, why 12th grade? That feels so late. And I agree, right? To begin conversations about college in 12th grade does feel very late. And that's part of this Find Your Why. What is it that we can do to ignite that why in students much earlier so that they can then prepare themselves for a successful post-secondary journey? So, Oscar, you want to be an educator. How will you use your experience to inspire the students that you will work with in the future?
That's really a question I always ask myself too. I have a younger sibling who I constantly ask. I'm like, what do you think you're going to do? And just let him know there's many options out there to do, and give them. And I would, for students as well, I would always say, would ask them hey, there's many options out there. Just don't stick with one. Go with as many. Try, look out, go beyond. Look for that stuff. Mostly if they need any help really outside of the classroom, I'm willing to give that help for any of those.
I love it. Okay, Mayor. So let's roll back to 2008 when we started having conversations about Knox Achieves and this big dream we had of sending every student in Knox County to college, which has really just sort of exploded, right, from that time. But how much do you think your experience as a first-generation student played into the creation of Knox Achieves?
A very great deal, because we would look around at folks who were leaving our Knox County high schools. And a lot of folks who had parents who went to college, they were on a pretty good path. But then those of us like me and you and Sumner and Oscar, whose parents did not have that opportunity, it was a lot more challenging for them. They had every bit as much capability as other kids did, but there just wasn't a well-defined pathway for them to go. Too many times, finances was a problem. And in addition to that, too many times there was just a lack of encouragement or guidance along the way. So when we started Knox Achieves, it was a really well-defined program. We wanted to take away the financial burden. We also wanted to provide some help and guidance from an adult mentor. And then we also felt it was important that students be able to give something back to their community, give it back in a meaningful way through the volunteer component of Knox Achieves and now Tennessee Promise. So that was really a tremendously driving force, because I could look when I would go to high schools and see really bright kids that weren't taking advantage of an opportunity later. So when we started this program along with Randy Boyd and Bill Haslam and others, and you were there from the beginning, it's one of those deals where we thought it could be a game changer. And I think it's been that. When I look at, Sumner and Oscar and our future in Tennessee is really bright because of young folks like that going to college and having an opportunity. And let me say this, I don't think it's really critical where you go. I'm so very proud to be a graduate of the University of Tennessee. But if you're going to Tennessee Tech or to Montlow or to one of our great colleges of applied technology, any of those options are fantastic. So just find something that suits you, that fits you, pick it, put yourself into it fully, and you're going to be successful. But when we started, I don't think if my background had been different, that we would have been able to create this type of program, because I had a little bit more understanding than some folks that may have had a different path.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think one of the things that I've been so proud of from our program from the very beginning that those external to Tennessee often get wrong is that it's so much more than just free college, right? Like I remember when Tennessee Promise passed and Wall Street Journal and, everywhere you turned, the national media was talking about Tennessee passes free college. And I thought to myself, like, if it was just that, we would not be seeing the numbers that we're seeing in terms of success. So, Mayor, talk just a brief bit about why it was so important to you and to us, Tim Williams and Rich and Randy and Governor Haslam. Why it was so important to us to do more than just free college?
Well, and two names you mentioned that don't get nearly enough attention, and I left them out as well, and shame on me for doing it, are Tim Williams and Rich Ray, two incredibly bright, successful businessmen who were there with us from the very beginning. And Rich just went off the board recently, and Tim is still a huge guiding influence for us. So I'm glad you mentioned both them. But I think it would be better than free college. This program would better be termed great opportunity, because anybody can do free college. People have done it for years. And to be candid with you, I don't think it really works very well. Great opportunity is when you take away the financial burden to a large extent. Great opportunity is when you're paired with an adult mentor who can guide you along the way. And great opportunity is when you have to give back something to help others. Those are great opportunities that you have in life. So it's much more than free college. This is a magnificent opportunity for every Tennessee young person to go get a college education, better their life, improve their career options, and really change the entire direction of our state. And we're well on our way toward doing that.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece. I think oftentimes all the programming gets overlooked for the free college piece. Sumner, you're a bit.
Let me jump in one more thing before you go to Sumner. A lot of times people say, well, this young person didn't have good grades. They had a terrible ACT score. I can truly relate to that. But one really neat thing about this program is it's open to everybody. It has no limits. It's that way by design. And we have a lot of unique programs to help kids that may need a lift up initially to get going. So I didn't want to jump in on Sumner and interrupt, but I didn't want that fact to go lost either.
No, I think you're so right. And, that I've become such a staunch proponent of that. It's for everyone, and it's up to us to help break down the barriers. Just because you are first generation, just because maybe you didn't live in the right zip code, that should not prevent you from being able to earn your college credential and break the cycle and have a different life. And I think oftentimes academic preparedness is sort of the burden is placed on the student, and we don't think about all the different pieces that play into that particular. And it's one factor among many, but that is oftentimes looked at as like the student doesn't deserve to go to college because they didn't work very hard. Well, it's probably because they were working full time to help support their family. There are all different layers to students. And I think the most important thing that we do at Tennessee Achieves now is we try at this very large scale to meet each individual student where they are. And Sumner is a big part of that with our coaching model. So Sumner, how do you think your story helps play into how you work with your students?
I love to be able to talk about this because, the challenges that I faced in college and the questions I didn't have the answer to, and that support that I was looking for, but I didn't have, like, I get to be that person for my students. And, a lot of my students have those same types of questions, and, they may also be first generation. They may also come from a lower income family, just a lot of the same similarities. I can use my personal, experience to be able to help them navigate that. And I love being able to do that and to just be that additional layer of support and to help advocate for them and teach them how to do that for themselves, because that was a huge learning part for me too, wasn't doing that. So.
Yeah, I think relatability is so huge, right? Like, I think all of our coaches find a way to relate to the students that they serve. Oscar, how about you on the Tennessee Achieves, Tennessee Promise front? Have you felt supported on your journey? It's a loaded question, Oscar. I don't know what you're going to say, so fingers crossed.
Well, yes, Holly has been my completion coach with Tennessee Achieve, and here and there, she always comes up and pops up, and she always sends me a message like, how's class going? She always interacts with me most of the time. And, and she's been a huge support for me as well. She's helped me through it all. Any questions as well, I go send her a message as well. Is another person I send a message now. Recently for FAFSA, I've been having difficulties on one thing or another. So I shot her a message. I was like, hey, do you mind helping me with this? And she's been a great help there. So I have to give it to the completion coaches here with Tennessee Achieve, for the great job they always do. And, they go above and beyond, I guess, as well.
Thanks, Oscar. Thank you. It feels like we planted that question for you. No, I love it. Holly's fantastic. I think she's one of our best coaches. I actually think they're all the best, to be honest. I'm a little biased there, but I'm so glad that you have a great relationship with her. All right, we're going to transition over to questions from the audience. And so get those to me. You can either place those in the chat or type them out in the Q&A. But the first question, I think, is such a great question. And I'll start with you, Mayor, but then ask Sumner and Oscar this question as well. What advice could you give the mentor? Mayor, you've been a mentor since the beginning, a long time mentor. Any advice for first time or newer mentors as they start this journey?
Well, the best piece of advice would be that no two students are the same. I've had lots of young folks I've had the opportunity to work with, and in many cases, some of them didn't need a whole lot of my help. They were self-sufficient and could do things on their own. There were other young folks who needed a great deal of help and encouragement. And so don't treat any two the same would be my words of wisdom to you. And sometimes you're thinking, well, maybe I'm not important because these young folks get it. But there's always going to be somebody who doesn't. And those are the ones that you're there for. So stay positive, work with those, and dig in deep. And it's been really fun for me to have served as a mentor since the very beginning of the program. And hopefully along the way, and I feel rather confident that I have, you've helped some folks to overcome some hurdles. And that's what being a mentor is all about.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell mentors that it is the student who is not raising their hand for help that most likely needs your messages the most, right? So hang in with them. Great message. How about you, Sumner? Any words of encouragement for any first-time mentors?
Yeah, just don't give up. If they are not, responding to your communication, trust me, they are probably reading it. They're just not responding at that time, but they definitely hear you. And, as long as you are consistent, I think at some point they might reach out to you if you're not hearing for them. So they need somebody who is consistent in their life. And even if you're not hearing anything, like, it's really important for you to be that for them. And, just to keep that open communication going. That's one thing that I would find super important in a mentor.
I love it. I will, every time I do a mentor training, I always sort of end with like, don't let the 17-year-old hurt your feelings, right? Like you are the grown up. They will hurt your feelings in the fact that they will not be as responsive as you want them to be. But the most important part is to know that you are there when they do hit a roadblock, and they do have what Sumner and the mayor and Oscar have all beautifully laid out today, an additional layer of support, maybe the only support that they have as they're making this journey. Okay, Oscar, over to you. What advice would you give a mentor?
Well, just, do your part, as much as you can. They'll take they'll take your choices of words very neat, like, well, to them, like Summer said, they'll read it, but they won't answer you right then and there, but just know that it's really appreciated there. I know Holly probably messaged me one time and I didn't answer because I was a bit busy reading off on something, but later on that night I texted her responding back on stuff, so it's just don't leave them hanging there. Keep on texting and talking to them.
You're saying layer on the harassment, Oscar. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
that's what I heard.
Say that, but I didn't want to say it that way. But yes,
I love it.
Chrissy,
Mayor?
I saw someone just shoot something across the screen about ways of communicating, and I think that's important too. I'll never forget back in 2008, I tried calling all my students, and nobody would answer, and I realized there was a generational gap there. So they said, try texting, and it was incredible. I started getting responses back immediately from them when I would text. So I know that you and your team at Tennessee Achieves really encourage everybody to read your email. But I think initially texting is a great way to stay in communication with the folks you're mentoring.
I think that's really great. Yes, texting works. We do know that. Individual text messages is what students tell us. They want to hear individually from their mentor and not on a group text, which makes sense, especially if you're talking about a first generation student who, again, may be really intimidated in a group setting with their peers who they see every day at their high school to raise their hand, right? Metaphorically speaking, raise their hand to say, like, hey, actually, maybe all my friends know this question or answer to the question, but I don't. And so that individual text messaging, I think what we hear from students anyway, is the most effective. Another question that we've gotten, which I think is really great, and it's part of our March theme for Find Your Why, but I'd love your perspective on helping students find what they want to do when they grow up, right? Like helping students find their major. Any advice there, Mayor? I know that when I landed, I went to Sewanee on a math scholarship, and now I run a nonprofit. And somewhere in between that, I was a PhD student for political science. So my journey changed greatly. And I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to not feel boxed in and I could explore. And especially first generation students, I think, like, I didn't even know that you could run a nonprofit. I didn't even know that there was a major called political science, to be honest. Math was just something I was good at, and Sewanee gave me a scholarship. But Mayor, how about you? How important is that for students as they're navigating for the first time?
Well, it's obviously important that a direction that you think you would like to go. But I think it's equally important to not be afraid to change. When you look at you and your path and me, and I'm not sure what Sumner's major was in college, but even though we don't use our degree in terms of classroom experience, perhaps on a daily basis, the other things we learned in college, we use constantly. The interpersonal skills, communication skills, things like that. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about changing my major. It may take a little bit longer if you wait too long, but on the other hand, found something you feel passionate about and want to do. The key thing is to have the credential that will open the door. And that is too oftentimes overlooked, because even though I'm not a teacher, which I'd planned to be originally, I certainly could not run the business. I certainly could not have been the mayor, I don't think, if I had not been a graduate of the University of Tennessee. And same thing with Sumner and graduating from Tennessee Tech, and soon to be Oscar graduating from MTSU, and you from Sewanee. Opening those doors initially is the key thing. So you can guide somebody in a direction, but eventually they're going to have to find their own way. The key, the absolute key, though, is getting in and finishing. Some people are going to graduate from TCATs and with degrees in welding or plumbing or pipe fitting and electricians, and later in their career, they're not going to be doing any of that. They're going to be running a business and doing something else, but they wouldn't have had that opportunity if they had not gotten the credential. So as much as it's great when you can figure out what you want to do initially, my son David always knew he wanted to be in advertising. That worked. I knew what I thought I wanted to do. That's not the path I've taken. Either of those are correct.
That's so good. And it's so right. I mean, I think, again, just going back to like first generation students specifically, we don't even really know what's out there once you do land in college, right? I thought you could be like 5 things, right, when you earn a college degree. And so I think it just opens up a whole new set of opportunities for these students. Okay, we have 3 minutes. So I'm going to start with Sumner, go to Oscar, and then end on the mayor. Any parting words of advice for, I think, really quickly, a first generation student, so give them advice, Sumner, and then mentors who are looking to encourage and guide first generation students. Ready? Go.
I definitely think you just have to figure out your why and what that fire in your belly is that kind of motivates you to push through, because there will be challenges that you will face along the way, but you can completely do this. You just have to figure out your why. And your why doesn't mean having an answer to what you want to be and what you want to do, but it's what's going to push you through to get you through those hurdles and challenges. And just know that you have Tennessee Achieves to support you through this, and just know that this is something that you can do as long as you know why.
Great. Oscar?
It's a bit what they said, really. I support like what they said already as well. So I don't know what else to say there.
Yeah. What do you think has made you successful to this point, Oscar?
What made me successful right now, it's basically really just the amount of support and people who always keep on pushing me to do better. I know I sometimes post stuff about what I've been doing with college, interviews like this on my social media, and my teachers will be, I'm proud of you. I'm so happy for you. And and for those praise I get, I like do it more. I want to do it more. I want to share that and everything, get the word out, of why I'm going there. Teachers are big reason why I'm going to college as well as my parents, So, yes.
That's great. No, that's perfect. How about you, Mayor? Advice?
3 really quick points. And I think these apply to students as well as mentors. Believe in yourself. Each of us have some unique talents. Figure out what that unique talent is and use it. Secondly, encourage others around you. Whether you're a mentor or a student, it's so very important to encourage others and help them along the way. If you can keep people from getting down, and a little encouragement goes a long way, I would strongly suggest that you do that. And finally, don't give up. There are going to be some bumps. There are going to be some real big hurdles, whether you're a student or sometimes when you're a mentor. But if you won't give up, if you'll stick with it, you're going to be successful. And we've seen that over and over in this program, and I think we're going to continue to see it going into the future.
No, all great advice. I very much am a proponent of believing in yourself. Again, I sort of call that fire in your belly. That's what Find Your Why for me is all about, is figuring out what it is that like motivates you and really dig into that, especially when it gets hard, because it will get hard, right? Like it just will get hard at some point, without a doubt, for everyone. It's not specific to you. And so lean into your support systems. Know that there is an army, especially in Tennessee, behind you called Tennessee Achieves that will try to clear the path as best we can to help you find success. I want to thank the mayor and Sumner and Oscar for today's conversation. I think it's been really great. I don't know if you're following the comments, but there are so many great stories of first generation students like us. So thank you for sharing those. Thanks for being a part of this journey. Thanks to the mayor and Sumner and Oscar, and thanks to everyone here for your support of our program and most importantly of our students.